After almost 3 years, Season 4 of The Dragon Prince is coming this November. With such a long hiatus, it is understandable that a lot of fans may have forgotten exactly what happened in the series so far. There's also been some extended media, including graphic novels and a whole tabletop role-playing game called Tales of Xadia, which has expanded the lore of the world and even continued the story in between Seasons 3 and 4. This video will hopefully serve as a thorough recap of the entirety of The Dragon Prince for people who don't want to rewatch the whole series before watching Season 4. Although, I mean, come on, like, watch it. Seriously. Just kidding, you can cut that part. For anyone who doesn't know what this show is, The Dragon Prince is a computer-animated fantasy series by Wonderstorm created by Aaron E. Haas, known for being the head writer on Avatar: The Last Airbender, and Justin Richmond. Season 1 premiered on Netflix in September 2018, followed by Season 2 in February 2019, and Season 3 in November of the same year. In June of 2020, after a fan campaign to #GiveUsTheSaga, it was finally announced that 4 more seasons had been picked up by Netflix, and now we finally know that it's coming in November of 2022. The Dragon Prince is set in the fantasy continent of Xadia, a world inhabited by humans, elves, dragons, and plenty of other magical creatures. Similar to Avatar with the 4 elements, magic in this world comes from the 6 primal sources: the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, the sky, and the ocean. Humans, unable to naturally use primal magic, then discover dark magic, which uses the essence of magical creatures to power it. The show revolves around the conflict between the humans and the elves and dragons of Xadia, centering on our main cast discovering the egg of the titular Dragon Prince and going on a quest to return him home. But before we dive further into the events of the show, let's first explore the history of Xadia. Long ago, Xadia was one land. While elves, dragons, and other magical creatures were naturally attuned to the primal sources of magic, humans were not, leading them to struggle to survive. The elves and dragons were not sympathetic to this plight, believing that if humans were meant to have magic, then they would have been born with it. The unicorns, another intelligent species of Xadia, did feel pity. However, one unicorn named Leola gave humans primal stones, magical artifacts that allowed someone to access the primal source without being naturally connected to them. She also taught them the ancient draconic language and runes used to cast spells. This allowed humans to start establishing great civilizations and developing their culture. After this, the unicorns were hunted by humans and are now exceedingly rare. The human city of Valerion was once helped by a mysterious star-touched elf named Erebos, who sided with them against the other elves and dragons. At some point, human mages discovered dark magic, with one mage named Xaard being gifted a powerful staff by one of the Great Ones, presumed to be Erebos. Dark magic consumes the essence of magical creatures and slowly corrupts the user, causing their appearance to change. Sol Regum, a sun archdragon and king of the dragons at the time, confronted Xaard, threatening to destroy the city of Valerion. Xaard refuses to give up dark magic, not believing the threat, and so Sol Regum flies towards the city. Xaard uses dark magic to cast a massive fireball, permanently blinding Sol Regum and causing him to flee, but not before he breathes fire at Xaard and destroys him. After this, Sol Regum is replaced as ruler by a moon archdragon named Luna Tenebris, Luna Teeny Breeze. Can I just call her like Luna? Okay, sorry. Let me take this again. Let me try this again. She desired to destroy the humans as punishment for their use of dark magic, but was convinced to spare them, instead banishing them all to the western half of the continent in an event known as the Judgment of the Half Moon. This caused the continent to be split in two, with the magical lands of Xadia in the east, the human land in the west, and a massive river of lava acting as the new border between them. Humans fought amongst themselves for land and resources in their efforts to settle their new home in what's known as the Mage Wars. This eventually resulted in the 5 human kingdoms as we see in the show: Catullus, Evanir, Neolandia, Delbar, and Doran. The Pentarchy was established, bringing an end to the wars. After Luna Tenebris, 300 years before the events of the show, Xadia came under the rule of a storm archdragon called Avazandum, although the humans simply called him Thunder. He guarded the border between Xadia and the human kingdoms. He was also responsible for imprisoning Erebos in an unknown location, hidden behind a magical mirror. And this almost brings us up to the events of the show, excluding some events that are shown in flashbacks during seasons 2 and 3, which we will get to later. The prelude in the first episode of the show ends by telling us that on the eve of last winter's turn, the humans used unspeakable dark magic to slay Thunder and destroy his egg, the Dragon Prince. And now, the world is on the brink of all-out war. Book 1, Moon, introduces us to the Princes of Catullus, 14-year-old Callum and 10-year-old Ezrin, plus Ezrin's pet glowtoad, Bait. We are also introduced to 15-year-old Rayla, a Moon Shadow Elf assassin who has been sent along with her mentor and adoptive parent Runan in the name of the Dragon Queen Zubeia to get revenge for the murder of Avazandum and his egg. Rayla is sent to take care of a guard who spotted the group of elves in the woods, but upon catching him, sees fear in his eyes, and she hesitates, allowing the guard to escape. When she returns to the camp, she lies and tells the others that she killed him. The guard goes to speak with Viren, the High Mage of Catullus, who has been examining a mysterious mirror in his study. Viren wakes up King Harrow, the ruler of Catullus, Ezrin's father, and Callum's stepfather. Upon hearing that Moon Shadow Elves have come to assassinate him, Harrow is shocked that the guard even managed to escape. Moon Shadow Elves are elite warriors, and under the light of the full moon, they become almost invisible. And of course, the full moon is tonight. They send word to General Amaya and her standing battalion, who are currently stationed at the Breach, Catullus' military base on the border of Xadia. But that is too far away to make it to the capital city in time. Callum is being trained by Soren, Viren's 18-year-old charismatic but not so intelligent son, and a member of the Crown Guard. Callum is a talented artist, but hasn't been very good at much else. He also has a crush on Soren's 16-year-old sister, Claudia, a quirky, bubbly young dark mage. Soren helps him to impress her, because he's cool like that. Ezrin and Bait spend their time sneaking around the castle and stealing their favorite food, jelly tart, from Barius, the local baker. Callum and Ezrin are summoned to see King Harrow, who tells them he's sending them away to the Banther Lodge, the royal family's winter lodge, even though it's spring. He doesn't specify why. Viren also summons his children to tell them about the assassins, which Callum overhears outside. The assassins do a ceremony to bind themselves to their mission with a magical ribbon. Remember that's going to be important later. They hear the sounds of the scouts approaching, and Runan uses his necklace to cast a spell that disguises them and their camp as trees. One of the party is the same guard that Rayla let escape, causing Runan to realize that Rayla lied about killing him, putting them all in danger, so he takes her off the mission. Callum returns to his room to pack, and in his frustration tells Ezrin that assassins are coming to kill their father, and that is why they are being sent away. Ezrin gets upset and hides in his room with Bait. Callum tries to apologize to Ezrin, even offering to perform the crazy jerkface dance, but gets no response. He goes to the palace library to meet Claudia, who shows him a wind breath spell using her sky primal stone. Callum compliments her, remarking that he would love to switch places and be a mage. This causes Claudia to perk up and run away excitedly, confusing Callum.
I do not understand girls.
Viren informs Harrow that they have failed to find the assassins, but that they've bolstered their defenses. Harrow doesn't believe it will be enough and is prepared to accept his death, facing the consequences for their mistakes. Viren and Claudia are still searching for a creative solution using dark magic, but Harrow has grown wary of it, and the two argue, with Harrow asking Viren to leave. When he does, Claudia runs up, claiming to have an idea. Callum returns to his room, and still gets no response from Ezrin. He looks through the door and realizes Ezrin's room is empty. A guard comes and summons him to speak with Harrow. The king gives Callum a sealed letter, telling him to open it when the time is right. Callum is frustrated and asks why Harrow can't just make peace with Xadia. Harrow explains that there are centuries of wars and crimes on both sides, including from himself. Callum is optimistic that Harrow will survive, but Harrow is not, and asks Callum to take care of Ezran. Meanwhile, Rayla has decided to sneak into the castle by herself, despite being told to stay at camp. She sneaks past guards and climbs up the cliff using her weapons. She makes it up and enters the castle, where she comes across Callum. Callum runs away, and Rayla chases him through the castle. They eventually end up in Viren's study, where she tells him that she's not only here to kill King Harrow, but also his son, Prince Ezran, as revenge for the humans killing Thunder and his egg. Callum tries to convince her that the whole war is a cycle, and then tells her that he is Prince Ezran to protect his brother, but the two are interrupted by the real Ezran's voice coming out of a painting. Rayla opens the painting to reveal a secret passage. Ez uses bait as a flashbang, and the brothers run down the tunnel. While Harrow is preparing for battle, Viren enters and presents his solution: a two-headed soul-fanged serpent, a creature that absorbs the soul of anything it bites. He wants to use dark magic to switch Harrow's soul with another's, so that he may survive while someone else dies in his body. Harrow rejects this, saying he'd rather die as a king than live as a coward, letting others die for his mistakes instead of him. Viren argues that Harrow's pride is getting in the way, and Harrow replies that it is Viren's use of dark magic that got them into this situation in the first place. Viren claims that every soldier would be willing to give up their life to save his, but Harrow questions if Viren would, which shuts him up, and Harrow orders him to leave. Meanwhile, Callum and Ezran reach a dead end, but Ezran starts pressing the rocks and stones in the wall and unlock a secret passageway which leads to a hidden room. They close it behind them, but Rayla manages to get through it straight away thanks to Ezran's hands being covered in jelly. The room is full of dark magic stuff and creepy specimens, and Ezran reveals what he's discovered: the egg of the Dragon Prince. Viren and Claudia return to Viren's office, and Claudia wonders why Harrow would refuse the offer that would save his life. Viren realizes he's always stood by his friend and would do so again. He says goodbye to Claudia, refusing to tell her his plan, and leaves with the soul-fanged serpent. Claudia notices Callum's letter from Harrow on the floor by a painting, and finds the jelly print left behind by Ezran, leading her to follow them down the secret passage. She arrives in the secret laboratory to find Callum and Ezran and Rayla staring at the egg. She tells the boys to get away from the elf and claims that Viren saved the egg so the elves and dragons couldn't use it as a weapon. Ezran can sense that the egg wants to return to its mother, so he trusts Rayla and leads them to another exit. Claudia tries to cast a lightning spell at them, but Callum grabs her primal stone and locks her in a chain. She uses dark magic to send some shadow wolves after them, which Rayla can't defeat with her blades, because they're just smoke. Callum uses the primal stone to blow them away with the wind breath rune Claudia used earlier. Rayla is surprised to see that Callum is a mage, and Callum is excited as he realizes that he is one as well. Viren goes back to Harrow and tries to appeal to their brotherhood. Harrow takes this as an example of his arrogance, and that Viren is trying to use his position and his friendship with Harrow to excuse his actions. He orders Viren to kneel and reminds him that he is a servant of Catullus. Rayla offers to show the egg to Renan in hopes that he will call off the mission, but the princes don't trust her, and Ezran instead takes him to the roof to show him together. Renan is not happy that Rayla disobeyed him. They show him the egg, but he refuses to end the mission because they bound themselves, and there's only one way to release it. The boys run while Rayla engages Renan in a duel to stall him. Upon realizing that he's being stalled, Renan leaves to return to the mission. Callum gets Ezran and Bait to hide while he goes to speak to their father, noticeably refusing to refer to him as Dad. He tries to get into Harrow's chamber, but Viren comes out. Callum confronts him about the egg, and Viren tells the guards to grab him and tries to figure out where they're keeping the egg. Callum threatens to cry out for help, so Viren uses dark magic to steal his voice. Also, fun fact here, I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be a cat's paw, and the idea of using it to steal someone's voice is the classic adage of, cat got your tongue. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. I don't know. Before he can do more, however, the assassins arrive. quickly making their way up the tower and battling the guards at the door. Viren is distracted and drops the spell holding Callum's voice. Callum screams for help. He flees back to the courtyard where Rayla offers to go in and help, but they decide to leave and return the egg to Xadia. After the battle, Runan is the only surviving assassin. He launches a Shadowhawk arrow with the now released binding from one of his arms as a message to the Dragon Queen that the king has been killed. He is then captured by the remaining soldiers, with Claudia deciding that they should keep him prisoner rather than kill him. Down in the woods, Rayla notices one of her bindings come off, but she hides it from the boys. The morning after Harrow's death, a funeral is held, despite it being tradition to mourn for 7 days first. Viren justifies it by saying that they are at war. He gives a speech where he claims that the princes are dead. Opeli, one of the royal advisors, refuses to light the pyre, so Viren gets Claudia to do it with dark magic. Rayla notices Callum drawing the primal stone and explains the 6 primal sources to him. Callum recognizes the symbols she draws from a cube that they had back at the Banther Lodge, and insists that they go there to get it. Rayla is reluctant, but agrees after Callum tells her that now he's never been really good at anything, but magic feels right for him. They travel to the lodge and Rayla goes in to find the cube. The princes then remember that Harrow was sending them here to escape the assassins just as a group of soldiers arrive. Led by their aunt, General Amaya, who is deaf and mute, communicating in ASL. She notices something is off and investigates the lodge, but the boys distract her by telling her that they haven't had breakfast. This takes priority. She finds them some weapons-grade bread in the kitchen. She shows them the letter she received from Harrow telling her to come and protect the princes, causing Callum to realize that he's lost the letter Harrow gave to him. Amaya hates elves, referring to Moonshadow elves as the worst kind. Rayla finally finds the room where the cube should be and finds it, but is attacked by Amaya and knocked unconscious. She awakens, tied up in a cellar, and is questioned by Amaya. The general believes that there are other Moonshadow elves around and leaves to help find the rest in a search. The princes lower Bait into the room and he flashes, allowing Rayla to attack the guards and free herself. The group runs for it, but are surrounded by Amaya's forces. Callum signs to her that they can't leave because the elf is a monster who has threatened to kill them and drink their blood, shocking Rayla. Amaya is unfazed, saying that she's killed monsters before, and orders the archers to shoot. Man, Amaya is she's just so cool. She's just such a cool line. Rayla plays along, threatening to kill the boys, causing Amaya to let them escape in a boat. She gets one of her scouts, Corvus, to follow them and get the princes back. Once they're away, Rayla expresses her offense at Callum calling her a bloodthirsty monster. She reveals that she did get the cube and gives it to Callum. When it falls near the primal stone, the sky symbol starts to glow brightly. Back in Catullus, Viren addresses the people and announces that he will be taking the throne as Lord Protector of the realm, until a new ruler can be chosen. Before he can be crowned, however, Amaya arrives and announces that the princes are still alive. Callum experiments with the cube, which seems to glow when it detects a creature or object connected to a primal source. Rayla secretly tries to remove her binding, but it can't be damaged. Callum tries to copy the lightning spell Claudia had cast earlier, but doesn't know the word to finish it. Rayla wants to continue traveling on foot, but Callum insists that the boat is easier and faster. Rayla is seemingly afraid of the water, but she denies it, and agrees to take the boat. As they travel, Callum reveals that Ezran's glowtoad is called Bait because deep-sea fishermen used them to catch giant fish. Rayla gets seasick, so Callum asks her about her life in Xadia to distract her. She describes a land where magic is everywhere, and also tells them that her parents are dead. They realize that they're about to go over a waterfall, leading Rayla to confess that she is afraid of the water, but it's too late and they go over. They land safely at the bottom, but Bait is in the water, attracting a giant fish monster that activates the ocean rune on the cube. It tosses them all out of the boat, and Rayla has to face her fear of water to save Bait from being eaten. Callum uses the first half of Rayla's lightning spell to electrocute the river monster, as well as all the nearby fish. Afterwards, Rayla reveals that the Moonshadow elves aren't supposed to show fear, and admits that her parents are still alive, but she wishes that they weren't. They were part of an elite group of elves known as the Dragon Guard, and when the humans came and killed the Dragon King, they all fled instead of fighting. Even though their boat is still intact, they decide to continue on foot, to Rayla's relief. Meanwhile, Amaya calls out Viren on failing to protect Harrow and accuses him of trying to seize the throne. Viren denies it and offers to support Amaya as Queen Regent. Amaya refuses and insists that the throne stays empty until the princes are found, which Viren is not happy with at all. Amaya visits the grave of her sister, Harrow's late wife, and the boy's mother Sarai. She's soon joined by Viren, and they bond over their shared memories of her. He apologizes and agrees to send his children to join the search for the princes, so that Amaya can return to the breach where she is needed most. Amaya insists that Commander Grin, her interpreter, lead the search instead. Amaya warns her soldiers not to trust Viren. This was some wise advice, because as soon as she leaves, Viren tells Grin that he's off the mission, and Soren and Claudia will lead it instead. Grin is then imprisoned in Viren's dungeon, where we also learn that Runan is being held in the dungeon and is refusing to eat. While Rayla tries fruitlessly to remove her binding, Rayla hears a sound in the woods, and finds Corvus, who tries to trap her. They battle, which ends with Corvus in a ditch. Meanwhile, Ezran and Callum wake up and realize that Rayla is gone, and Callum panics, thinking that she took the egg. She did not. Callum warns Ezran that they still can't trust her yet, even if everything they were told about the elves was wrong. Rayla returns and rushes them into leaving, causing them to accidentally leave their food behind. As they travel, Rayla refuses to take the easy path, as they'll be more likely to run into people, instead opting for a steep route up the mountain. The princes complain about carrying the egg up that way, but also refuse to let Rayla carry it. They discover that they've lost the food, and Bait has drunk all of Rayla's moonberry juice.
Moonberry juice.
That's how it's pronounced. Moonberry juice.
Moonberry juice.
Moonberry juice. That's moonberry juice. They continue up the snowy mountain, and while Rayla and Callum argue about trusting her enough to carry the egg, Bait burps loudly and triggers an avalanche. Man, I had a roommate in college did the same thing. Bruh. Callum tries to save them using Aspero, the wind breath spell, but they are all swept up. They all survive, but end up on a frozen lake. While trying to retrieve the egg, Callum apologizes and trusts Rayla enough to carry it. Rayla confesses the nature of her binding, that as long as Ezran lives, it will continue to tighten until she loses her hand. Callum passes her the egg, but her injured hand causes her to drop it, and it falls through the ice. Ezran dives in after it, and as soon as they start to worry that he's dead, Rayla realizes her binding is still tight, and manages to break the ice just enough to get him and the egg out. However, the egg is now glowing much weaker. Meanwhile, Soren meets with his father before the mission to find the princes, and Viren tells him that he must return with the news that the princes were dead, and that if he finds them alive, well, accidents happen every day. Viren believes that if Ezran becomes king, he would be too weak to stand up to Xadia and make the hard choices. He tells Soren to keep the mission secret, even from Claudia. Claudia tries to cast a revealing spell on the mysterious mirror to no effect. Viren reveals that he found the mirror near where the Dragon King and Queen slept, so it must be important. Or, maybe they just needed a mirror to, do their dragon hair before they went outside. Viren then goes on to tell Claudia that she must bring back the egg above all else, even if it means sacrificing Soren. He tells her to keep this mission secret, even from Soren. Well, I guess that just makes sense. The gang goes to a nearby town for help, with Rayla disguising herself as Human Rayla! They encounter a human who wields a sun-forged blade, a dagger that is enchanted to stay as hot as the moment it was forged. Rayla goes to try and get this dagger in hopes that it can cut off her binding, but it doesn't work, and the man, Tristan, recognizes her as one of them, an elf. Callum and Ezran go to an animal doctor, trying to explain the problem with the egg without revealing exactly what it is. But he can't help unless he fully understands what's going on, so they choose to trust him and show him the egg. The doctor tells him that the egg is dying, and he has no way of saving it. He does tell them about a miracle that happened a couple of years ago on the cursed caldera, the supposedly haunted mountain near the village. They go and meet a girl named Ellis, who I don't remember, I think I might have forgotten who that is, and her pet wolf, Ava. She tells them the story about finding Ava as an injured cub. She had to have her paw amputated and her family couldn't look after her, and claimed that the pact would reject her. I know exactly what that's like. I once had to shave my neckbeard, and my pack of friends on Reddit just wouldn't accept me anymore. Ellis, not wanting to let Ava die, ran up the cursed caldera. Near the top, they find a cave and a mysterious figure appears and heals Ava's leg before vanishing. The princes decide to find this miracle healer and meet up with Rayla. They hope that the healer can fix her hand as well. The group are chased out of town by a mob led by Tristan and run away up the cursed caldera, where the townspeople do not follow. Meanwhile, Soren and Claudia arrive at the Banther Lodge, with some tracking dogs as failed to pick up the trail since the boys traveled by water. Claudia wants to try a dark magic spell but doesn't have any DNA from the princes to use for it. Instead, they find one of Rayla's braids that was pinned to a tree by an arrow. The pair go searching for the other ingredients she needs, with the last one being wisps from a hidden cavern. They set out to climb the tallest mountain in Catullus, also called the Catullus Mountain, to cast the spell. Back in the Catullus castle, Viren is trying to convince Runan to eat, but Runan claims he is already dead. A Moonshadow Elf philosophy of accepting death so that he will not fear it. Viren relishes the challenge of finding something that the elf fears more than death itself. Grin is also there. Later, he brings down the mysterious mirror and asks Runan to identify it. When he refuses, Viren shows him some coins. Runan laughs, but upon looking more closely at the coins, calls him a monster. He uncovers the mirror. As soon as he looks at it, Runan congratulates Viren on finding something worse than death. No longer having any use for his prisoner, Viren begins casting a spell that drains Runan's soul from his body, storing it in a coin. We also see Viren's true form, corrupted by dark magic. On the cursed caldera, the gang meets Ellis again, who decides to guide them to where she met the miracle healer. Callum comes up with a plan to deal with the monsters on the mountain, and Rayla remembers the draconic word for lightning, Fulminous, and realizes that that was the part of the spell that Callum was missing. They continue up the mountain and don't seem to encounter anything too scary, except for a dead monster that has had all of its blood drained. Suddenly, a giant leech appears and attacks. Giant leech sounds like my brother-in-law who's always trying to get me to invest in crypto. Callum's plan doesn't work, and they climb to safety. Rayla talks about how her hesitation prevents her from doing her job as an assassin, but Ezrin praises her for her compassion. Ellis praises Callum for his confidence, but Callum claims it's all because of the primal stone. After the leech seems to be gone, they climb back down, and it appears again. This time, Callum's plan works. They continue up the mountain, but Ava begins whimpering and seeming to understand what she was trying to say. Ezrin announces that there is no miracle healer at all. When they ask him to elaborate, Ezrin reveals that Ava told him something, and Callum immediately dismisses him, as he doesn't believe that Callum can actually talk to animals. As they continue traveling, Callum notices that the moon rune on his cube grows brighter the further up that they go. Hearing something off the path, Rayla finds what seems to be a person trapped in spiderwebs. Rayla tries to free them, but only dust comes out. They find more and more spiderwebs, and eventually a giant spider which attacks. Ezra notices something off about it, and is convinced that it's not real, because spiders don't talk like that. Sure enough, he goes right up and screams at it, and all it does is scream back. Realizing he's right, Callum apologizes for doubting his brother, and performs the famous jerkface dance, which even the spider enjoys. They finally arrive at the tree where Ellis met the miracle healer. She appears from the sky, riding a large bird, but Rayla recognizes her as a Moonshadow Elf, specifically a Moon Mage, an illusionist. She introduces herself as Lujane, guardian of the Moon Nexus, and explains that all the monsters on the mountains are just illusions, created by her to scare people away. But how did she then heal Ava's leg? The mage removes the wolf's moonstone collar, and her leg disappears, revealing that it was just an illusion so that humans would accept her. This is a problem because they needed actual healing for the egg. They show the egg to Lujane, who suggests that the only way to save it would be to hatch it, which can only be done in a storm, and there's no sign of one. Callum realizes that his primal stone contains a storm and smashes it, releasing the storm. The egg hatches and we meet the Dragon Prince himself, Ozymandias, who bites off Rayla's ribbon, freeing her hand. Soren and Claudia arrive at the top of Mount Calic, and she casts her tracking spell, causing the glowing wisps to fly towards Rayla. The group mistakes them for a wonder of nature, but Lujane is worried. Back at the castle, Viren watches menacingly from afar. And that's the end of Season 1. Book 2 Sky opens with General Amaya patrolling the breach and being attacked by a group of Sunfire elves, defeating most of them and narrowly escaping the leader who wields a sun-forged blade. Back in Catullus, Viren informs the High Council that there are reports of dragons flying over towns and cities in the kingdom, insisting that they retaliate. Other councillors are hesitant as there haven't been any skirmishes since the assassination of King Harrow. Viren points out the reports from Amaya of Sunfire Elves gathering at the border. He demands that they call a summit of the Pentarchy, the leaders of the 5 human kingdoms, but Opeli says that only a monarch can do that, and he would need to use the king's royal seal. Opeli rules out any action against Xadia until the princes are found. Later, Viren returns to King Harrow's quarters, untouched since the battle with the assassins. He has some Vietnam-like flashbacks about that night before stealing the stamp of the King's seal. He uses it to write letters to the other 4 kingdom monarchs and brings them to the Crowmaster, assistant to the Crow Lord, threatening him into sending them. Meanwhile, at the Moon Nexus on the Cursed Caldera, Callum writes a letter to his stepfather, recounting their journey, believing him to still be alive. They have a meal with Lujane, who reveals all of her food is just grubs disguised with illusions. Rayla wants the group to leave and continue towards Xadia, which Lujane supports as she believes they're being pursued. The princes insist on staying a little longer to learn more about moon magic. Callum learns from Lujane that the ancient Moonshadow elves who built the temple around the Nexus could open a portal to another world between life and death, but that the temple was destroyed when the continent was split. Lujane explains that there are 6 other locations around the world where primal sources are at their strongest, called nexuses. Or nexuses? Nexi? Nexons? What is the plural of nexus? Nexuses. The crater of the Cursed Caldera is the Moon Nexus, as the water in the lake perfectly reflects the moon's light. Callum asks her to show him how to do moon magic, but she rejects him because humans can't do magic without a primal stone, and she does not regard dark magic as true magic. He confronts Lujane, and she explains that the magical creatures are born connected to a primal source through something called an arcanum, an innate understanding of the secret or meaning of the source. The Moon Arcanum is about understanding the relationship between appearance and reality. While this is happening, Ezrin and Ellis try to teach Zim how to fly, with little progress, even employing the help of Fifi, Lujane's moon phoenix. Rayla is patrolling the area, and is put to sleep by the sound of an ocarina, perhaps one of time. It's such an obvious joke. Like, what other reference to an ocarina is there? Grabbing a rose before falling unconscious, the music is being played by Claudia, who has shown up with Soren. Dun dun dun! Soren is ready to kill Rayla, but hesitates because she's asleep and asks Claudia to wake her up first. Rayla reveals that she was already awake, having used the thorn of the rose to keep herself from falling asleep. A fight ensues, which is interrupted by Callum, who convinces them that Rayla isn't a threat and that they went with her willingly. They call a truce until the morning. The next morning, Soren and Claudia discuss how to bring the princes home, settling on persuasion. They need to butter them up, butter them up, butter them up. She makes them pancakes, extra fluffy thanks to dark magic, and the group reveals that the dragon egg has hatched. Rayla makes it clear that they're bringing Zim to Xadia. Soren lies and tells the boys that the king really misses them, which Rayla knows isn't true, but has been struggling to find a way to tell them. Callum shows Claudia around the temple, confessing to breaking her primal stone, and discussing his desire to do magic and Claudia's feelings about dark magic, with Callum eventually asking her on a date to see the Nexus at night. There you go. Yeah, my boy's shooting his shot over here. Soren tries to fulfill his secret mission to get the princess killed by making a zip line, a slidey sling go fast rope, a slidey sling go fast. Oh my god, this is gonna be weird. A slidey sling go fast rope. Purposefully making the rope loose so Ezrin will fall. Rayla sees through this and makes him tighten it. She struggles to explain this to Callum, who doesn't believe her because he's known them much longer. She goes to Lujane, who gives her some really bad advice, making her realize that she needs to be honest and tell Callum the truth about Harrow's death. This comes too late, however, as on his date with Claudia, just as they're about to kiss, Claudia confesses to Callum that his father is dead. Back in Catullus, Viren returns to the mirror in Runan's former cell, trying a new spell to see what it really is. This, once again, doesn't work, frustrating him and causing him to smash up the room before extinguishing the resulting fire using magic. As the room becomes dark, the mirror suddenly glows and reveals a mysterious library on the other side. Viren watches the mirror for hours, waiting for something to happen, but ultimately falls asleep. He wakes up in time to see a mysterious elven mage enter briefly, seemingly unaware of Viren watching him. When the elf next shows up, they approach the mirror, and Viren tries to talk to them, but realizes they're just looking at their own reflection and can't see him from their side. Later, he realizes the elf snuffs out the fire with the same magic that Viren used earlier, causing the other side to go dark. Then, out of the darkness, their hand reaches out and touches the mirror. Meanwhile, back at the Moon Nexus, Rayla apologizes to Callum for not telling him about King Harrow's death, but Callum is more concerned with how he'll break it to Ezrin. The brothers take a walk together, and he's unable to tell him, leading him to understand why Rayla couldn't do it and forgiving her. Now knowing that Soren lied before, Rayla again tries to convince Callum to leave for Xadia without telling Soren and Claudia. But Callum reasons that Claudia did tell him the truth. Claudia gives Callum the letter from Harrow that he dropped back in the castle, but he doesn't open it yet. Instead of trying to convince them to stay, Claudia and Soren say that they want to come with the gang to Xadia. Rayla believes this to be a trap, so they come up with a clever plan to find out if they're really tricking them or not. She goes to Lujane for assistance. Later they meet up with the others, all ready to leave. Lujane gives Ava back the moonstone collar that held up her illusionary legs. As they head off, Soren and Claudia hang back and prepare to grab the princess once they take out the elf. Rayla goes off to find some berries or something, and Soren follows her and attacks, which Rayla expected. Claudia uses dark magic to chain up the boys and put Zim in her bag. She tries to apologize to them and explain herself, but they don't react. She realizes that something's off, and Ellis removes the moonstone collar from Ava, revealing that Callum, Ezrin, and Zim were all illusions. The real princes fly in on Fifi and grab Rayla. Claudia casts a spell to pull them down, but is attacked by Corvus, who has followed them up the mountain. Corvus then gets knocked out by Soren. Ellis waves goodbye and tells the gang not to forget about her. At the breach, Amaya receives the signal from their secret outpost on the other side that everything is fine, but it's late. She gets a team to go over there and investigate. They find the place abandoned until one soldier shows up and tells them that everything is fine. He secretly signals that someone is behind him, and Amaya realizes that Sunfire elves are here. The humans and elves fight and are easily subdued, but Amaya manages to escape their leader, Janai, and escape, getting everyone out safely. Meanwhile, as the gang flies, Callum tries to meditate in an attempt to forge his own connection to the Sky Arcanum. Fifi becomes exhausted from flying so far away from the Moon Nexus and is forced to land. The gang decides to continue themselves, and Fifi flies back to the Moon Nexus. Their next obstacle is a large bay. They offer to walk around it for Rayla's fear of water, but they don't have time. They head into a nearby port town and find a captain to take them across the water, with Rayla once again becoming Human Rayla! Was that supposed to be a Rayla impression? That was That was so perfect. I mean, I don't like to toot my own horn, but Paula, I mean, if you ever get sick of doing the Rayla voice, I can take it from here. They end up meeting Vilis, who is blind, meaning he won't notice Rayla and Zim being an elf and a dragon, and his talking parrot Berto. He takes them to his ship, the Ruthless, and warns them that there's a storm coming, so they should wait a few days. Since they're in a hurry, they decide to leave now and race the storm. Vilis has a deep connection to the wind, similar to what Callum would expect from an Arcanum. The storm catches up in the middle of the bay, and they barely manage to make it to a nearby island. Callum decides to venture out into the storm, with Zim, to try to connect with the Sky Arcanum. He comes across a windmill with a lightning rod, and goes up to try to get struck by lightning, you know, like an absolute idiot. I'm sorry, Callum, I didn't mean to call you names. I love you, boy, I love you. You're a good son. You make us all so proud. He realizes he shouldn't risk his life to learn magic, and lets go. Then, Zim gets struck by lightning. He's a storm dragon, though, so he's fine. Back in Viren's basement, the mysterious elf in the mirror returns with some items that they want Viren to find. Once he does, he gets them to perform a ritual, which ends with each of them sacrificing some of their own blood. Viren is hesitant to do this, as he doesn't even know who or what this mage is, so he leaves without completing the ritual. He returns to the Crowmaster to find that all 4 of the other kingdoms have responded to his message and have agreed to a summit of the Pentarchy. He returns to the mirror and covers it with a sheet before leaving again. Viren travels to Allhaven Hill for a summit of the Pentarchy. We are introduced to the rulers of the other 4 human kingdoms: King Alling of Nudaludia, King Farida of Evernear, King Florian of Delbar, and the young Queen Anya of Doran. They believe that Viren has been named Regent of Catullus until Ezrin comes of age. Viren gives a magical PowerPoint presentation on the Xadian threat against the human kingdoms, including the assassination of King Harrow, the Sunfire Elves gathering at the border, and the dragon seen flying above Catullus, warning them that it is only a matter of time before these things happen to them as well. 3 of the rulers agree to join Catullus in the fight against Xadia, but only if they are all united. Anya, however, is well aware from her time as queen that charisma and sweet words can be more dangerous than the hardest of threats of violence and coups. Viren tries to convince her by telling a story of when Doran and Catullus worked together in the past to achieve a miracle. And that brings us to flashback time! 9 years before the events of the first season, Harrow became the king of Catullus. He was soon asked for help by the queens of Doran, Annika and Niha, whose kingdom was suffering a terrible famine. Wanting to help, but realizing that they did not have enough to share, Harrow's best friend Viren discovered a dark magic spell he could use to warm the land and grow enough food to feed everyone. This spell required the heart of a magical creature called a Magma Titan, which lives in the volcanic border mountains. Harrow, his wife Sarai, Viren, the queens of Doran, and a group of soldiers led by Sarai's sister, General Amaya, journeyed across the border and successfully defeated the Magma Titan, but were not able to make it back before the dawn when Thunder arrived, because Harrow refused to leave the injured behind. Thunder chased them down, mercilessly killing the queens of Doran, as well as Sarai, who sacrificed herself to save Viren's life. Viren was able to cast the spell and save 100,000 people from dying in the famine. At the same time, on Villa's ship, Callum finally decides to open the letter from King Harrow. In the letter, Harrow expresses his regret at not spending more time with Callum and admits to distancing himself because he didn't want to be a replacement for Callum's biological father, who passed away. He tells some of the story we heard from Viren and remembers his decision to take revenge against Thunder, which had led the assassins into coming for him. He implores Callum to reject history as a tale of strength, but see it as one of love, and to learn from it, but then to let it go, to avoid repeating the mistakes of their ancestors. He also tells Callum that he wants him to have the cube from the Banther Lodge. He explains that it's called the Key of Erebos, and it once belonged to an archmage named Erebos, who was a master of all 6 primal sources. Harrow doesn't know what it is, but believes Callum could be the one to unlock its secrets. After reading the letter, he goes above deck, where the gang spots the shadow of a dragon flying in the clouds above them. Viren finishes his story and claims that Anya's mothers would be proud of her, and that they would join them against Xadia if they were here. Anya agrees, but then she still refuses to join and repay the debt of 100,000 lives saved by spending 1 million people to die in violence. The other leaders are now hesitant to join since Durin is opposed. Viren is now enraged and leaves, calling them all traitors. Then the episode fades to black, and then the music plays. He goes, "Nya, nya, 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 nya." Claudia and Soren reach a town near the border of Xadia, planning to drop off Corvus before continuing to catch up with the princes. The town is distracted, however, as a fire-breathing dragon is flying above the town as a threat. It has been doing so for 3 days now, but has not attacked. Soren takes command as a crown guard and orders the town's ballista to fire on the dragon, despite Corvus pleading that it's probably just trying to intimidate them. The shot provokes the dragon into attacking and sets fire to the town. The noise awakens Rayla and the gang, who are camped out on a cliff nearby, and they watch the dragon from afar. Soren realizes that he's made a big mistake and frees Corvus to get people out of the town. Claudia uses a griffin's eye to enchant a ballista bolt, causing it to follow the dragon until it hits it, causing it to crash to the ground near the town. Ezrin rushes to help the dragon, and Calla and Rayla follow. They find the dragon alive but heavily injured, and pull the bolt out before leaving to avoid the approaching humans. Rayla ends up going back against the others' will, as she feels she has to protect the dragon, quoting Callum's own line about breaking the cycle. She sneaks back to the dragon and tries to break the chains holding it down. She gets into a fight with Soren. Callum feels useless now that he's not a mage, but remembers Claudia's spellbook and goes back to the dragon. He stealthily grabs Claudia's book and some ingredients and uses dark magic for the first time, copying the spell he saw her use to turn the chains into snakes, despite Claudia warning him that dark magic is dangerous when you haven't been trained. The dragon awakens and fights Soren, who manages to cut off a horn before being yeeted into a rock, breaking his spine and paralyzes him. Oh no, that's pretty dark. The dragon is then distracted by Zim, who snuck away from Ezrin to follow the others. The dragon recognizes Zim and flies away. Meanwhile, Viren returns to Catullus, where he is confronted by Opeli for committing treason by using the king's seal and lying to the other rulers about being regent. Having lost all other options, he now returns to the mirror to finish the ritual with the mysterious elf. They finish the ritual by slitting their palms, creating a small portal on either side of the mirror. The elf places a small caterpillar creature into the portal, and it appears on Viren's side, climbing up to his ear and speaking to him with the elf's voice, asking Viren how he can serve him. And 1 million slash fanfics were born! Viren interrogates the star-touched elf to find out who and where he is. He learns little, but the elf does reveal his name. Erebos. Hey, that sounds familiar! Hey, editor, cut back to the Key of Erebos clip! He also tells Callum that he wants him to have the cube from the Banther Lodge. He explains that it's called the Key of Erebos, and it once belonged to an archmage named Erebos, who was a master of all 6 primal sources. Viren puts the caterpillar in a jar and leaves to the library to find out more about this mysterious Erebos, avoiding the guards who have been ordered to arrest him. He finds that every page mentioning Erebos disappears before he can read it. He returns to the mirror angry and asks why he should trust Erebos. Erebos responds chillingly that he should not. Claudia tries desperately to heal Soren's paralysis with dark magic, but fails. She brings him to the hospital back at the town, where the doctors tell her he's never going to walk again. Soren reveals his secret mission to kill the princes and says he's glad to be paralyzed because now he can't do anything horrible. The line always gets me, man. It's not your fault, Sore Bear. It's not your fault. You got a bad daddy. He's a bad daddy. Bad daddy. Poor boy. He instead decides he's going to be a poet and performs an absolutely incredible haiku. Claudia is so offended by this that she gets kicked out of the hospital. Rayla and Ezran bring Callum back to their camp. He's not looking so good after his first time using dark magic. Corvus shows up and instead of fighting Rayla, reveals to Ezran that Amaya sent him to protect the King of Catullus, causing Ezran to realize that his father is dead. He leaves, upset and needing some time alone. After a while, a worried Corvus follows him and comes across banther tracks, making him think that Ezran has been eaten by a banther. Rayla laughs and tells him that Ezran can speak to animals and probably just caught a ride on the banther. Callum, in his dark magic coma, has a fever dream where he talks to his evil self who tries to tempt him into accepting dark magic. Harrow, who reminds him that he's free to choose whatever he wants and that his destiny is not pre-written, causing him to reject dark magic. He then meets Villas, and they sail through the storm together, with Callum being the sail. Callum ends up drowning as his real body struggles to breathe. As Claudia wanders around the scorched town, she encounters Ezran riding atop a banther in an alleyway. Claudia and Ezran go for a walk together, and Claudia tells him about when her mother Lissa split up with Viren and left back to Delbar, forcing her and Soren to choose between their parents. Soren chose Viren, but Claudia couldn't choose, so Lissa told her that she needs to stay with her brother. They both appreciate how lucky they are to have their siblings. Realizing Ezran can talk to animals, Claudia asks him to help her find some milk fruit so she can help Soren. It is harmless. There's nothing to be concerned with here. Claudia just wants to find some milk fruit. There's nothing horrifying gonna happen. They find some with the help of a squirrel, and also find a family of deer, which is what Claudia was really looking for. I lied earlier. There is something more to this than innocent milk fruit. She makes Ezran leave before approaching one of the baby deer. She returns to the hospital having killed the deer, using dark magic to transfer its agility into Soren, healing his paralysis. The effort of this causes some of her hair to turn white. The two leave the hospital, and Soren is worried about what Viren will think about them failing their mission. Claudia assures him that they're alive, and that's what's important, and shows him the horn he cut from the dragon, which will be a powerful dark magic reagent. Back in Catullus, Erebos offers to earn Viren's trust by helping him get the attention of the other kings and queens. And speaking of kings and queens, all of you people out there watching the video, you're all kings and queens, you're amazing. He makes his way to the top of the tower, and using the weapons of the fallen Moonshadow Elf assassins as well as their ashes, and with a little bit of help from his new pal Erebos, he uses dark magic to resurrect smoky versions of them, similar to the wolves Claudia made back in Season 1. You guys remember that, right? The Shadow Wolf. He commands them to bring terror to the other four kingdoms. He returns to his chambers, but the other guards have found him. Erebos connects with Viren and is able to cast primal spells through him. But he is overpowered by the guards, and Erebos breaks the connection. Rather than being killed, Viren is arrested and taken away, while the guards discover the secret passage behind the painting, finally freeing Grin from the dungeon. Meanwhile, Callum's dream continues as Rayla begs for him to wake up, and the sky rune on the cube starts to flicker. As he drowns, he hears his mother's voice from a time where he was having a panic attack and helped him breathe. Just as Rayla is about to confess her love for Callum, he wakes up, declaring that he now understands the Sky Primal. He proves it by casting Aspero, just in time for Callum and Corvus to arrive. The group gets ready to leave, but Ezran makes a difficult decision to return to Catullus and to take on the responsibility of being king. Callum, Rayla, and Zim arrive at the border, and the light of the moon reveals the secret moonstone path across the river of lava. As they move across, the sun begins to rise, causing the runes to disappear and the rocks to start sinking into the lava. As they run, Zim manages to fly for the first time with a little help from Ezran through their psychic connection. They finally make it to the Xadian side of the border, but are met with the worst thing they could have found. A cliffhanger in the form of Sol Regum, also known as Racist Dragon Uncle. Now on to Book 3, Sun, Episode 1. Season 3 opens with a flashback to the meeting between Xiard and Sol Regum 1,000 years ago. But we've already talked about that. This is just like, here's the thing, and then we're just like, but we're not going to talk about it. Rayla explains to Callum that this is Sol Regum, former king of the dragons, who has become a symbol of rage and bitterness since he was blinded. I've also become a symbol of rage and bitterness ever since I saw the Rings of Power show. Topical. It's out of date by the time you guys watch this. They decide to sneak past him, but Zim is frightened and causes Sol Regum to notice them, blasting fire in their direction. They're forced to try to reason instead, and Rayla introduces herself and Zim, pleading the dragon to let them go, to let them pass through safely so they can return the poor dragon lad to his mother. Sol agrees, but refuses to allow the filthy human to come with them, saying that either Callum dies or they all die. Yeah, he's a pretty reasonable guy. Rayla convinces him to reconsider, but Sol Regum smells. I smell death! Which basically means he smells dark magic on him and starts charging another fire blast. Again, like I said, he's a pretty reasonable guy. Rayla takes Callum's stinky scarf and runs away, distracting the dragon while Callum and Zim try to run past. Rayla becomes trapped, but throws the scarf off, and Callum uses Aspero to blow it away, leading Sol Regum to a rock formation that traps him, allowing the gang to pass. Elsewhere on the border, General Amaya and her lieutenant are debating abandoning their fortress, fearing an attack by the Sunfire Elves, who have overtaken their outpost on the other side. Commander Grin arrives, informing them that reinforcements that they requested are not coming, because Lord Viren has been arrested for treason. What? So the message didn't reach him. Amaya decides that they just can't abandon the breach and decide to destroy it entirely. I used to do the same thing when I would play basketball with my friends. When it was time for me to go home, I would just stab the basketball with my switchblade. I'm kidding. I never had any friends to play basketball with. I never had any friends at all. They rig up explosives along the mountain path, but the fuse is cut by Janai before they can detonate them. Amaya takes a torch and decides to sacrifice herself to save the others by setting it off herself. Janai attacks and causes her to drop the torch, but she manages to use Janai's Sunforged blade to set off the explosives, destroying the breach. She somehow survives, but is trapped on the Xadian side and captured by Janai and her warriors. Back in Catullus, Viren is imprisoned, along with Erebos' caterpillar, who I will also be referring to as Little Bug Pal, probably for the rest of the video. Opele calls for Viren to be executed. The council is interrupted by the arrival of Ezran, Bate, and Corvus, who have come in riding Banthers. The next day, Ezran awakes in his father's old chambers, unsure if he's ready to be king. He discovers that being king entitles him to unlimited jelly tarts. He makes his way to the throne room with Corvus, and the Crowmaster comes in to deliver the king's many unread messages. They start with the urgent ones and learn that King Florian and King Farida have both been assassinated. King Alling has also been gravely injured. Xadia appears to be declaring war on all of the human kingdoms. The meeting is interrupted by Marcos, the guard that Rayla chose to let live in the first episode, who reports that Soren and Claudia have been found and captured. Ezran is confused as to why they've been arrested, insisting that they were just Viren's children, and that doesn't mean that they were necessarily a part of his conspiracy. Claudia tries to make excuses, but Soren is silent. Ezran finally agrees to have them locked up while he thinks about it. Claudia is angry about being imprisoned, but Soren points out that since Viren told them to kill the princes, they were guilty. Claudia is in denial and insists that Soren must have misunderstood. Prince Kasif of Nudaludia, the 19-year-old son of King Alling, arrives in Catullus and demands to speak with Ezran. He has brought his army, assuming that Catullus would be leading the retaliation effort against Xadia. However, Ezran refuses, stating that both humans and Xadia want peace. But Kasif doesn't listen and accuses Ezran of being a failure, both as a king and as a son. He returns to his camp to await a decision. Later, Apelli talks to Ezran, having noticed that he's not wearing the crown, and suggests that he could appoint a regent of his choice to run things while he focuses on growing up. After thinking for a while, he returns to the throne room and declares that he doesn't want to be the king as his father was. Punishing children for the crimes of their parents would not be the way he would be leading. So he decides to free Soren and Claudia, and he tells Kasif that Catullus will not choose war with Xadia. Meanwhile in Xadia, Callum is amazed to discover that literally everything here radiates with primal magic. They come across mellow daisies that play music and fart flowers that you know what that means from the name, right? Like, I don't need to explain that. They're flowers that fart. They reach a cliff and climb the giant tree there, riding one of the seed pods down to the ground below. Rayla brings Callum to a clearing which she used to visit as a kid and introduces him to the Adoraburs, little fuzzy guys that stick together and are very cute. Rayla, Callum, and Zim continue to the Silver Grove, home of the Moonshadow Elves where Rayla grew up. Callum decides to disguise himself as Elf Callum, an elf blood elf. An elf blood elf. I did it again! Oh my god! Callum disguises himself as Elf Callum, an earth blood elf. All of his best mates are trees. The Silver Grove is concealed by a spell, and they perform a dancing ritual to lift it. They quickly notice something is wrong, as nobody seems to be able to see them, and they have no faces. Rayla realizes that she's been made into a ghost! A ghost! I'm Rayla! Human Rayla! Rayla realizes that she's been made into a ghost, a form of magical banishment that was done to her parents as well. She brings Callum to the home of Ithari, Runan's husband, who helped raise her while her parents were out being dragon guards. She's convinced that he wouldn't have done the spell, but sadly, he has. He does manage to spot Rayla in a reflection. He admits that he told Runan she wasn't ready to be an assassin, but now his husband is dead because Rayla abandoned them. Rayla runs away in tears. Later, Callum finds her by a pool in the center of the village. She explains that Ithari enchants a metal flower for each assassin that goes out on a mission, and it sinks if the assassin dies. The other elves would have all seen everyone sink, except for one, Rayla, and they assume that she had abandoned them. Ithari approaches again and briefly breaks the spell to talk to her. Rayla explains that she did fail her team, but shows him why. Ithari explains that the Dragon Queen is dying and gives them mounts to travel faster, and gives Runan a moon opal. It's a surprise tool that will help us later. The ghost spell returns and the gang leaves. Ithari releases a Shadow Hawk arrow to bring a message to the Dragon Queen, telling her that Zim is alive and coming back. Unbeknownst to everyone, however, it's revealed that Runan's flower in the pool is still not fully sunk, implying he's somewhere between life and death. Elsewhere in Xadia, in the Sunfire Elf city of Luxoria, Janai interrogates Amaya with the help of an interpreter named Kazi. Amaya remains silent, and her only response to Janai's questions is to tell her to stick a sword up her, we can't say that, we're gonna get demonetized. Janai decides to bring the prisoner to her sister, Queen Kessa of the Sunfire Elves, who simply tells Janai to execute her. Janai refuses, citing warrior's honor, and Kessa decides that the light will decide her fate. A ritual is performed to determine if Amaya is indeed pure of heart, which she does, and surprising the elves, she is, forcing Kessa to allow her to live. Back in Catullus, Kasif returns, and Ezran informs him that the Dragon Prince is alive, and very cute. So there is hope for peace. Kasif calls him naive and leaves, but one of the council members, Salir, catches up with him and asks everyone to speak in private. In the dungeons, Soren and Claudia visit Viren, who uses a magical butterfly to disguise his true corrupted form. Claudia tells him that the egg has been hatched and admits that she chose saving Soren over getting the Dragon Prince, which Viren is enraged by. He claims that he would have asked her to sacrifice his own life to get the egg as well, but Claudia confronts him about telling Soren to kill the princess. At this point, Viren pulls what's called a pro-gamer move, also known as gaslighting, and pretends that Soren just misunderstood him. Gaslight gatekeep girl boss. As the siblings leave, Salir brings Kasif to visit Viren as well. Ithari's Shadowhawk message is intercepted by a mysterious Skywing elf who reads it. Callum and Rayla continue to travel, but Callum notices Rayla is depressed and tries to initiate Big Feelings time, which doesn't work. They soon meet the mysterious Skywing elf who introduces herself as Naimi Celery. Well, her name is Nyx for short, and she's my favorite character. She claims to be an emissary of the Dragon Queen, who received their message and is here to fly the Dragon Prince home herself. Rayla refuses, and Nyx wonders how they plan to cross the Midnight Desert. Rayla says that they're going to go around it, but Nyx offers to take them across herself to save them days of travel. The black sands of the desert are incredibly hot, and at night the place is full of soul-fanged serpents. Luckily, Nyx has an ambler, a giant creature that can walk across the desert in 2 days. As they travel, the ambler's foot gets stuck due to the underground tunnels created by the serpents. Callum makes an Avatar reference boomerang, while Nyx frees the ambler. They reach the oasis at the center of the desert, which is protected by a magical shield that keeps the soulfangs out. That night, Callum overhears Rayla crying. He tries to comfort her, but she runs off. Callum follows. She doesn't want him seeing her like this and admits that she feels like she's lost everything. She doesn't belong anywhere and has failed everyone. Callum gives her an inspirational speech about how awesome she is, and she kisses him, which he wasn't expecting. Rayla realizes he wasn't wanting her to kiss him and forces him to swear that they'll never speak of it again. They return to their camp and realize that Nyx, the Ambler, and Zim are all gone. In Catullus, Kasif comes back and explains that the armies of Evenir and Delbar have arrived and are ready for war with Xadia. When Ezran again refuses, he announces that if Catullus doesn't join them, then they will all attack Catullus in the morning. Opeli insists that they could win against the other kingdoms, but Ezran worries about the human cost, which she admits would probably be tens of thousands of people. Ezran doesn't see this as any sort of victory. Ezran is eventually approached by Salir, who proposes an alternative. Ezran leaves Bait with the baker to take care of him. Meanwhile, Erebos' caterpillar, Little Bug Pal, starts spinning a web over Viren's eye, which allows him to see a ghostly version of Erebos. The deal is that Ezran will abdicate the throne and swap places with Viren, who will take over as king, and in return, the other kingdoms would not attack Catullus, and any soldiers who did not wish to fight would be free to lay down their arms and stay behind. And so, Viren is freed, and Ezran is imprisoned. Callum and Rayla search for their mounts, which have run off outside of the oasis. Rayla's Shadowpaw comes back, but Callum's Moonstrider has its soul drained by a soul-fanged serpent. The two have no choice but to wait until sunrise to avoid the snakes. The next morning, they follow the Ambler's tracks, eventually catching up as its foot is stuck again. They make it up and confront Nyx, who wanted to bring Zim home herself to get a reward. She flies away, but Zim electrocutes her and she falls. Rayla saves Nyx from the Soulfangs, and when Nyx asks why, Callum explains and gives another speech about how awesome Rayla is, and then kisses her. He apologizes, but she kisses him back, and then Rayla is born! This is the best part of the show. Meanwhile, in Catullus, Bait visits Ezran in his cell, along with a stack of jelly tarts. Viren officially claims the throne, against the objections of Opeli. Corvus brings her away and suggests that they flee for Durin before they start going after traitors. They are noticed by Soren, who cuts them off. Turns out, Soren is with them, and he frees Ezran and helps him sneak out of the city, where they meet up with Opeli, Barius, Corvus, and Lujane, who Soren had sent a message to. He and Bait fly away on Fifi to meet up with Callum and Rayla. Lujane decides to travel through the human kingdoms on her way home, messing with people while disguised as a human. Claudia reaffirms her loyalty to Viren, saying she understands why Ezran had to be usurped. Erebos says she'll be a valuable asset, but Viren actually stands up for her and reminds the elf that she is his daughter and not an asset. He presents himself to the combined armies of the 4 human kingdoms and allows anyone who doesn't want to fight to lay down their arms. One of the first to do so is Marcos, the guard who was spared by Rayla. The deserters are forced to wear a badge of a broken link to show their cowardice. Callum, Rayla, and Zim are dropped off on the other side of the Midnight Desert by Nyx, who warns them that the Storm Spire, where the Dragon Queen lives, has pretty thin air because it's so high up. Meanwhile, Ezrin travels across the continent on Fifi, who is exhausted but insists on seeing it through to the end. As the human army marches, Soren tries to smoosh the caterpillar, but Viren tells him not to do so, referring to it as his animal familiar. Soren dubs it as his little bug pal, a name Erebos is very pleased with. Erebos has come to understand that Viren was responsible for the death of Avazandum, the Dragon King, and asks how it happened. Viren retells the story through a flashback. Flashback, yeah! Cut that part out for me, please. Don't leave that in. A while after the death of Sarai, Viren convinced Harrow to take an opportunity to get some good old-fashioned revenge on Thunder. He had acquired the Horn of a Unicorn thanks to Claudia, and had also collected the dying breath of Sarai as she died. He convinced Harrow to give his blood to combine these ingredients with Sarai's spear into a weapon of vengeance, one that could defeat even Avazandum, King of the Dragons. The two journeyed into Xadia, but did not find the King of the Dragons at the border, so they rode through Xadia to the Storm Spire. There they found Thunder, who told them that on this day he would spare them if they left immediately. Harrow, enraged that Sarai never got that choice, attacked, managing to throw Sarai's corrupted spear at the Archdragon, turning him into stone. Viren then realized that Thunder must have been here, and not at the border because he was protecting his egg, meaning his mate Subea must not have been there, deciding that the egg must be destroyed to prevent him from becoming a powerful creature of vengeance. Of course, we all know that that's not actually what ended up happening, and that he actually stole the egg. Erebos is very pleased to know that Avazandum is dead, as he was the reason that he was imprisoned in whatever location is on the other side of the mirror. They receive word that the breach has been destroyed, meaning they won't be able to cross into Xadia. But Claudia reveals the dragon horn that Soren had cut off, which Viren is able to use in a dark magic spell to part the lava Moses style, allowing the army to pass. Rayla and Callum arrive at the base of the Storm Spire, where the stone body of Avazandum still stands. Fifi arrives with Ezrin, but the exhaustion of traveling so far is too much for her, and she dies. She burns away into a single feather, but since she's a moon phoenix, this will allow her to be reborn when the time is right. As the human army travels through Xadia, Soren asks Viren what the plan is, but Viren rejects him, saying it will be revealed when the time is right. But Viren doesn't actually know what the plan is either, and instead asks Erebos. Erebos wants to fulfill Viren's wishes, which he presumes to be conquering Xadia. Although Viren isn't so sure, but realizes it's pretty much unavoidable. Erebos says that the key will be getting Ozymandias, but first, they need something from Luxoria, the stronghold of the Sunfire Elves. Over in the city of Luxoria, Janai informs Queen Kessa that a human has come seeking passage, claiming to know what happened to their grandmother, Queen Aditi. Viren is brought to the throne room, where he asks for safe passage for his army. Kessa refuses, unless he goes through the same light ritual that Amaya did. The ritual reveals his true form, tainted by dark magic, and they decide to purify him. He's brought to the Sunforge, the source of Luxoria's power, while Janai goes and tells Amaya that her king is here. Realizing it's Viren, Amaya insists that he's a liar and an incredibly dangerous man, and that he needs to be stopped before he does whatever it is that he's planning. As the ritual begins, the caterpillar comes out of Viren's throat, larger than it was before. It climbs onto a Sunfire Elf priest and bites him, causing his staff and the primal stone within it to become corrupted, along with the Sunforge itself. Erebos takes over the body of the priest in order to taunt the queen. He whispers to her the fate of her grandmother, who apparently he knew before killing Queen Kessa. Amaya stops Janai from going up there, as the people of Luxoria flee. Viren returns to the army with the corrupted Sunstaff, where he announces that he will give them all a gift a gift that will protect them from the fire of the dragons who will inevitably defend the Dragon Queen. He casts a spell that transforms Kasif, as well as all the other soldiers, into magma creatures. Soren sneaks away, but before he can leave, he is confronted by Claudia. Soren tries to convince his sister to leave with him, having seen what their dad has turned into, as well as what Claudia is starting to change into. Claudia can't handle choosing between her family members again, so Soren is forced to leave her behind. Meanwhile, Team Zim climbs the storm spire and comes across a warning telling them to prepare to draw their last breath. As they climb higher, they struggle to breathe, except for Zim. He's fine. They eventually all collapse. Ezrin is woken up by Pyra, the fire dragon he saved and whose horn Soren had chopped off. She carves a rune into the ground and Ezrin realizes that it's a spell. They literally have to draw their last breath. He wakes up Callum and gets him to cast the spell, which allows him to breathe normally at the high altitude. Callum then kisses Rayla, causing Ezrin and Bait to realize that they are a couple now. Side note, I love how Bait realizes it a second before Ezrin. Like, look at this. Like, Bait puts it together first. The gang makes it to the top of the storm spire, where they are met by a Skywing elf mage named Ibis, who informs them that they are too late. Ibis explains that Zubeia is not dead yet, but she fell asleep days ago and hasn't woken up. Zim is nervous about beating his mother, and so stays behind while the others go and see her. Ezrin tries to wake her up, but to no avail. Rayla finds it hard to be here, as this is where her parents abandoned their duty, which led to all of this happening. My boy Soren arrives at the storm spire, having rode throughout the night to get here. He frees his horse and begins climbing, which doesn't go well because of his heavy armor. He encounters Ezrin and Pyra, who bring him to the top where Callum does the spell to let him breathe. Soren announces that they're all doomed, and explains that Viren is coming with an army of monsters to kill Zim. Ibis goes to scout and see how long they have, casting a spell that turns his arms into wings, allowing him to fly. He's surprised to learn that Callum can use primal magic, but rather than teach him, he tells them to leave and get Zim as far away from Viren as possible. Rayla agrees that they should leave, but wants to stay behind and protect Zubeia, giving him the moon opal she got from Ithari. They argue as Callum thinks they're blinded by pride, and Rayla starts to think he doesn't know her at all, and leaves. Callum breaks the moon opal, allowing him to cast a moon spell, the history projection one, the one that we saw Lujane use all the way back in Season 2. The spell allows him to see what really happened on the day the egg was stolen. He finds out that Teadrin and Lane, Rayla's parents, refused to abandon their duty when the other dragon guards fled. They fought Viren and were subdued. They managed to convince him, however, to not destroy the egg and instead keep it, convincing him that it could be used as a powerful weapon. They saved the Dragon Prince. Viren then presumably put them in coins like he did with Runan. Callum goes to tell Rayla, who doesn't believe him, until he shows her a drawing of her parents to prove that he did in fact see them. The gang decides to take a vote on whether to stay or to run. Soren gives an epic speech about how Viren would never stop chasing them, finally realizing his father is evil and their only chance to stop him is here and now. They all agree to stay, just in time for Ibis to return and tell them that the army will be there by sunrise. Also arriving are Janai and Amaya, who have brought what remains of the army of Luxuria. Ibis and Ezrin, riding Pyra, both fly off to go and find reinforcements for the final battle. Callum paints runes on his arms, copying the ones Ibis had used to create mage wings. He shares a moment with Rayla, who is rudely interrupted by Soren. Soren apologizes to Callum for picking on him all the time and admits that, deep down, he was jealous of Callum's loving relationship with Harrow. The gang and their allies have a meeting to discuss the battle plan. They have an army of Sunfire elves at the bottom of the spire, and Callum will be above them, preparing to use magic to get rid of any enemies that might make it past. Rayla will stay up top and defend Zim and Zubeia at the very tippity top of the spire. She will be the last Dragon Guard. Viren's army finally arrives, and Erebos explains that he will show him how to absorb the power of the Dragon Prince. The Sunfire Elves form a magical barrier with their shields, and the battle begins. The Elven shield wall is quite effective, until Claudia uses the Sun Staff to cast a corrupted sun magic spell that blows them all to smithereens. Kasif makes it through the new barrier and defeats Amaya and Janai. Ezran and Pyra return with a group of fire-breathing dragons who burn the entire army. Unfortunately, Viren's spell means that the fire only strengthens them, and they begin bringing down the dragons. Back on top of the mountain, Zim is finally ready to meet his mother. He goes into the room and tries to wake her, but fails. Kasif manages to make it all the way up to Callum and is about to kill him when he is shot by an arrow fired by Queen Anya of Durin. The army of Durin, along with the Broken Link soldiers, including Corvus, Opeli, Grin, and Barius, all appear. This turns the tide of the battle, and Callum leaves to go get Rayla, since now they've pretty much won. The remaining Magma soldiers are captured, but Amaya is concerned that Viren is still missing. Ezran spots Claudia and stumbles into Viren, who is about to kill him, when Soren confronts him, eventually stabbing his own father to save the true king of Catullus. Claudia is shocked that he would do that, and it's revealed that this Viren was only an illusion, and they realize that the real Viren is at the top of the spire, battling Rayla. Viren freezes Rayla with ice, but Bait flashes, allowing Zim to run away. Viren goes after him, planning on turning Rayla into a coin and harvesting Zubeia later. Zim flees to the very top of the spire and flies off the edge, but is dragged back by a dark magic as Erebos starts casting a dark magic spell to absorb him through Viren and the caterpillar, who is now like a massive big nobody gonna be smooshing this boy. Like, look at this guy, oh my god. Bait grabs a torch to free Rayla from the ice, and she runs up to Viren, but is knocked aside. Callum arrives just in time to see Rayla charge Viren and take them both off the top of the storm spire. He jumps after them and manages to save Rayla by casting the magic wing spell, and we get this incredible shot while Viren falls to his death. The allies reunite in the storm spire, where Zubeia finally wakes up, happy to see her baby. And elves and humans working together? This is something she had apparently always hoped for. Meanwhile, in the post-credits scene, Nick Fury emerges from the shadows. I'm just joking. Meanwhile, Viren reawakens in a cave, having died and been resurrected by Claudia. She also definitely killed a dude, like look at that, there's the boot right there. She totally killed some guy. The caterpillar has spun itself into a cocoon and is slowly transforming. And that is the end of Season 3 and the show so far. There's been some other canon material that has been released, so we're gonna go ahead and do a brief rundown of that. Through the Moon. Through the Moon is a graphic novel set shortly after Season 3. Callum, Rayla, Ezran, and Soren and Bait travel from Catullus to the Moon Nexus to resurrect Fifi. Lujain is now in a relationship with a man named Alan. He was the guy with the huge sword from the town near the cursed caldera. Rayla has apparently been having nightmares about Viren and her parents and Runan. Rayla and Callum rebuild the Moon Hinge to reopen the portal to the world between life and death to learn about the truth about Viren and her own family. She accepts that she won't see her family again, but becomes convinced that Viren must still be alive. That night, Rayla writes a letter and leaves to go searching for Viren. And a little side note here, it's Callum's birthday when she does this. Rayla dumped Callum on his birthday. Like, how much pain must they put my son through? There's also a whole tabletop RPG called Tales of Xadia, which has plenty of new canon material information in it, but that's a whole video in itself. Season 4. Book 3 concluded the first phase of the show. Book 4 through 6 will be Phase 2, The Mystery of Erebos, and there will be some spoilers for those who haven't seen Season 4 yet from here on out. Book 4, Earth, begins with Viren's resurrection, which is revealed to have happened 2 years after the Battle of the Storm Spire. There have been a few official clips and trailers released now, as well as some short stories set between Seasons 3 and 4, including Callum finding Erebos' mirror, Janai and her brother Karim holding a funeral for King Kessa, and Rayla's letter that she wrote to Callum before leaving. Season 4 of The Dragon Prince releases on November 3rd, 2022 on Netflix.
At the end of this video, I just wanted to quickly switch from Vero to my voice to thank Vero and Lord Turpington so much for making this video a reality. They helped by writing a script and reading the script, and without them this would have never happened. So thank you so much, you both, and please check them out. Their channels are at the top of the description. And that's it for now. Enjoy season 4 of The Dragon Prince, and bye!